Well, good evening and welcome. I was going to say to the four horsemen of the apocalypse, but that's not what I meant at all. The four authors of this fabulous book. Now, if you haven't seen it, the first thing to do is to search through it for photographs of yourself and people you know. To do that, they have very cleverly shrink-wrapped all the copies, so you have to buy one first. It's a wonderful arrangement. It's been the most enormous task getting it together, and I'm absolutely thrilled that we've got the four people who did that work sitting here with us today. I'm going to start at the far end, Martin Bishop, while he's struggling with a jug of water. There, catch him out. Martin is the author in the sense that, well, they're all four the authors. He did the writing bit, and he will talk about that in a moment. Carolyn Murphy, whom many of you, all of you probably know, everyone on here already. Carolyn edited it, which I always think is the hardest part in many ways, because every author I know always puts in more words than are required, although Martin's very good at it, so I'm not going to go down that path. Carrie Starren, who's got the wonderful joy of having four generations of a family in the club at the same time. She's the club's archivist and has been working tirelessly in a cellar for the last 3 years, blocked away with no light and no anything else, but doing some remarkable things that have made this book really come to life. And Tony Gamble, who very rarely you can see this evening without a camera. That is what the face looks like. It does not look like a camera lens, which is what you're used to. What I plan on doing is asking a few questions of all together and of each individually that I hope will give you a feeling for the process. Am I blocking you out here? For the process of writing this book, getting it together, pulling it through, the inspiration for it, and how the experience has been. So, Karen, it's not a great surprise. I'm going to ask you first. What I'd like to ask you is, how long ago did this extraordinarily ambitious mission begin? And whose idea was it? Where did the idea come from?
Well, it came from me and it came from Sandy, basically. Well, I thought it was a really good idea when a member suggested that we produced a book about the club, but at that stage, we weren't actually in position to do so. And then, so we put it to one side. Then later, in Sandy Carhill's reign as chairman of the club, she was approached by somebody else with the same suggestion. So we thought it was probably time that maybe we ought to discuss doing something about it. And I was at that stage, I was doing the magazine as well. So we'd looked at a professional proposition to do it, and then we also looked at our magazine printer to print it for us, the chap who's been printing it for us before. And so we decided that we'd do it between us as members rather than getting professionals in to do it, because it was just going to be a little bit more fun, a little bit more hard work, but a little bit more fun. So Sandy handed the editorship to me, and we said we'd get on with it. So Martin came along as club historian and agreed to write the most major copy. Carrie came as a retired archivist who took over as the archivist from Ron Paisley. Perfect. And Tony Gamble, well, pictures. Who could be better? So that's really how it happened about four and a half years ago.
Goodness me. And Martin, were you writing with a blank sheet, or was there a previous history of the club? And if there was, did it help you with writing this? Was it detailed? Was it informative?
This is Martin. Oh, you're talking to Martin. Good.
Right. Yes, there is a previous history. It was written by Nigel Miskin, and it covers the period from 500 AD to 2000, or thereabouts.
Don't we all?
And it runs to many tens of thousands of words. The structure that we actually followed in the book was largely Nigel's structure, not entirely so. but largely Nigel's structure. And the problem that I had to task is not writing an original history, but taking Nigel's history and condensing often 10,000 words down to 500 and keeping the essence. Nigel had the great advantage of writing largely about dead people. It is much more difficult to write about people who are alive because you don't want to offend people and so on and so forth. But the last two chapters I think 11 and 12, deal with a period broadly from about 1990 onwards. Nigel wrote, he didn't write a great deal about that period for obvious reasons, because most people were alive. So I had to, most of the stuff there was original, and certainly beyond 2000, dealing with the East Wing, for instance, is all original. But getting it all into 500 words is tricky. Towards the end, I decided to do 600 words and leave Carolyn a bit of elbow room to knock some stuff out if she wanted to. So that's the way we did it. And then we're going to talk about it later. The last chapter was just an afterthought, which we...
We'll touch on that later, I hope. Carrie, did you find there was enough material for you to work with when you started running an archive? Because I don't know that this club has been very good at keeping its own history and keeping archives. Was there enough in the records? Were the records in good enough shape when you began?
Quick answer, no and no. Thank goodness, again, Nigel to the rescue. He had left incredibly detailed records of all the materials he had used when he was writing his manuscript. So at least I knew what I was looking for, but what I didn't know is where to find it. So the hunt began. A few places were interesting. I found the original 18th century deeds sitting underneath the meadowboat bronze in the long gallery in all that heat. Not terribly good for parchment deeds. I did eventually manage to find the safe. Martin will remember this. We bevied down in, but everyone told me there was a safe. Nobody could find out where the safe was. Eventually, buried under a pile of boxes, we found the safe. Where's the key? So another hunt began for the key. Kathy, in her magic way, suddenly rushed down bearing one key. We opened it only to find it did contain every single one of the original minutes of this club, going back to 1869. An absolute treasure trove.
So fantastic. So that's a real good place to start.
Yeah, can I give the second part?
Yes,
just
please.
Because it's now, in no small way, I have to really thank my lovely little team of Joe Kimber, David Abelson, and Pauline Matthews, who've been bevying away down in that cellar with me. And we have now got a dedicated room for the archive, and they're in pretty good shape now, all boxed and listed. So yes, Brilliant. And yes are the two answers now.
Brilliant. And Kathy didn't have to look in the membership list to see if there was a safe breaker on the
No.
in the club. Thank goodness for that. Tony, you are almost best known for the camera lens and a great many other things besides, but you are wandering constantly taking photographs and have been for 3 decades or so. How on earth do you narrow down those tens of thousands of photographs into the few you see in this wonderful book?
Well, it is very difficult. People say, what are you, a portrait photographer or a landscape photographer? Neither. I regard myself as a photojournalist, and what I'm trying to do is capture occasions and people doing things. And the archive boards, which are down the corridors, which are all mine, have got, each of those have got about 30 or 40 pictures a year of what I hope are people having a jolly time and enjoying themselves at Hurlingham. Since then, I built up my website, which anybody can get onto. All you have to do is Google Tony Gamble Hurlingham photographs. It's all there. But what I had wanted to do with the book was to have similar occasions. They had to be, because they were obviously momentous and important occasions, but different pictures. So every time I was looking for something important that had happened, but finding a different image that hopefully nobody had seen before.
Wonderful, and I think hugely successfully too. Obviously, from your perspective, Carrie, all the photographs that Tony's taken have been fantastically helpful, but how difficult was it to find images, and images going back to the 19th century? How easy was that?
think you're going to be surprised by my answer to that. The 19th century images were the easiest. Hurlingham was very, very prominent in the early days and covered in Illustrated London News, Tatler, even the Times. It was really quite easy to find material. The post-war period was pretty tricky, but luckily members came to the rescue there, in particular silver screeners, and came bearing their wonderful pictures and albums. So that's all. The tricky one was between the wars, and that one really took a bit of ingenuity and ferreting in the most weird and wonderful places. One particular story I quite like, there was a gentleman called Henry Brooke Johnson, and he was the manager and secretary of the club from 1925 to 1933, and again from 1940 to 42. I could not find a single picture of this man, yet he dealt with the big Great Flood, he built the swimming pool, all sorts of things happened in his reign. So late one night, as I tend to do, I was beavering away on the internet, and I suddenly found Brooke Family History. So I pressed the button, contact us, and I waited. About 6 weeks later, suddenly I get this message, would you like to see Granny's album? And his two granddaughters came back, and I got Tony on board, and they bought this magnificent album, and it literally had a picture of everything, all the staff, the swimming pool building, absolute treasure trove. Look out for the pictures in the book, and I've used a few of my recent articles in the Hurlingham.
So that's where that wonderful photograph of the combined staff sitting for a school photo came from, was it?
No, that was just pre. That one I found. Oh, you found that one, Tony?
I did, yes. I don't know where it came from, but I found it.
But it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Martin, you've known the club for a long time. You were chairman of the club at one stage. Yes, I know. You look surprised. You were, honest.
I was.
Did you find that this process taught you much about the club that you didn't know, or taught you more about what makes this club so unique?
Well, obviously, I'd read Nigel's history many times. But one area he was a bit, well, he didn't deal with any great depth, was pigeon shooting. So I became an expert on live pigeon shooting. And it was obviously an incredible activity we had here, and with huge sums gambled. Typically, there might be 75 people shooting. They'll all put a fiver in the pot, and the winner might walk away with 150 quid. That's about 15,000 quid, and that's an afternoon. So it was big money. And they had a thing, what did they call it? But there was a gambling group used to turn up. They got excluded from Hurlingham, but they were allowed into the gun club, I think, for £1, which is about 100 quid. And they used to gamble on everything. They used to gamble on the next shot. And it could be, tens of thousands of quid changing hands. So that was really interesting. What makes this club unique, and what makes it what it is because I think it's always had an ability to adapt to a changing environment. Things have happened to this club over the years, over the last 150 years. We've always managed to adapt and alter ourselves to them. So we're still here 150 years later, which again is one of the reasons why I wrote the last chapter. But did I have any great surprises? I don't think I did, in truth.
Phew, that's a relief.
But just one final thing. You say it's unique. In a way, it's not unique. If you went round the British Empire, you would have found clubs like this all round the world. It's basically the New Delhi Gymkhana Club brought home, really.
Its uniqueness is perhaps what you've already identified, that it survived.
Yeah.
That it still flourishes and is still relevant, whereas most of the others that were colonial in that sense maybe didn't in the same way.
Yeah.
Carolyn, you edited the club magazine for several years, so obviously taking a pencil to excessive verbiage is in the blood. Did you find editing this ambitious book difficult in comparison, or did you give yourself a set of rules? Were there forms to follow?
Well, it was really, it was a completely different kettle of fish, really. We set ourselves, it was much more difficult selecting which picture should go with which, trying to make sure existing members were all included, impossible. As much as possible, covering each chapter, gently adjusting, shortening, copy. We would have made twice as long as, at least. Breadth, accuracy, and the most important thing of all is humour. So I hope you'll all find funny parts of it, as well as, and not find too many inaccurate bits. Very, very different to doing the magazine.
And different time pressures, of course, as well.
Totally different time frames.
And Tony, I know, strapped himself to the roof of the building and took a photograph of as many as possible in your desperate attempt to get as many living members into the book as you could. A stroke of genius. I'd like to throw this open to all of you now, the next question, which is, it's very personal, it's very subjective, but did writing this book together, did it result in changes to the way you felt about the club, or how you see the club, or where you want the club to be? Did it affect you in that way? Start with Tony.
Well, I think that what I became aware of as I was looking through all the old pictures and trying to match them with new pictures was just how many different things people did over the years. And I think that was the wonderful thing. You could join this club and have a special interest and probably found a few kindred spirits who wanted to share it with you. And that really, I think, was what held the club together.
We've just lost you.
We've lost me.
We've lost everyone. Right, well, I'm perfectly okay. I shall bellow. And fingers crossed I shall be heard. Martin, I'm going to go for a practiced thespian and hope that you can project your voice without the loudspeaker.
What would you like me to say?
Exactly the same question. The extent to which this helped you reformulate your understanding and appreciation of the club. Can you all hear us still?
Yes. Yeah.
So there's the level you've got to keep it at.
I don't know whether I had a greater understanding of the club. Looking through the history, you see events that have hit us, like after the First World War, where we very nearly lost quite a lot of the ground. And the whole of the club. Nearly lost the whole of the club at the end of the First World War. The same thing happened at the end of the Second World War. We very nearly lost the whole of the club, and we ended up losing the two polo grounds because of pressures from outside. If we take another club which existed a long time before, the Hornsley Wood Club, which I can't remember whether I mentioned it or not, but it was where Frank Heathcote did his shooting before he formed Hurlingham. It was swept away, the whole club, when London started to expand and they needed more open space. And I think here we are as a club after 150 years, an oasis. And we've heard this word applied often. We're an oasis right in the heart of London, sitting on 40 acres of very, very valuable land. And it's become exclusive. We have, I don't know, 2 or 3% of people pass on each year, and virtually all of those places are taken by people coming through. So, children of members. So the opportunities for changing the face of the club are simply not there. And I think unless we address that at some stage, I think we might be faced with trouble in the future. So maybe I'm talking about what I put in.
No. I think you may have slipped to a final chapter,
yeah.
But I'm going to ask if we have. Can you still hear? Have we've got sound back? Have we? Brilliant. Thank you. Well done. I was going to try and flannel for a bit, Carolyn, rather than have you bellow, poor thing. That seemed a bit unfair. Over to you. How do you feel this is?
We've set an enormous task for ourselves. Impossible to cover everything, impossible to speak properly. However much there was, and still an enormous amount to learn about how the club runs, who is here. Fascinating history, fascinating people, how badly and how selfishly people can behave, and in other ways how really kind they can be if they see somebody in trouble. So as a club, I think it's the most wonderful place. with fascinating, fascinating history and fascinating people.
How do you feel about it?
Plus ça change, I think, would be my words. Everything that happened in the past. There is nothing new, the same arguments, the same discussions, the same delights. It's just an endless repetition. And I could always go back and find an incident, which I often send up to Alan and say, oh, look, there it is, this happened then.
Previous.
The club's got definite previous, including letters to the press, and goodness knows what else was
Yes.
all there. The other thing that really struck me is that we have always spent money to get ourselves out of trouble. We have gone down as far as £15, but invested a lot of money and picked the whole club back up. I think perhaps the swimming pool, if I may, just for one example, I mean, we were on our uppers until the swimming pool was built, middle of the Depression, 1932-33. It was the most successful thing they did. 120,000 people visited the pool in the first year. It was open, and it opened the floodgates to families joining the club. It's that kind of thing I found quite interesting and made me think about the club in a different way. Personally, I've actually met people in the club because of working and family. I used to run in and out, never met anybody. Through the book, I've met lots and lots of people. For me, that's the personal benefit of doing this
There
job.
was one little snippet about swimming that you mentioned some time ago to me, about the time of day when mixed swimming could begin. Would you like to mention that?
The committee sat down and had a discussion about swimming before 1 o'clock, ladies, on polo days. They actually sat there for a whole committee meeting, decided whether it was appropriate for ladies to be in their swimming costumes before 1 o'clock on polo days, which I thought was absolutely delightful. Motion was
in
not
case the
carried.
players were put off their stroke.
I'm assuming this must be fine.
And Tony?
Well, I just think it's a wonderful place, and I just love looking at all the weird things that people did. That's what the joy of the club. It's a joy.
Tony, I'm now coming to you on a different subject. A lot of the images in the book were photographs of photographs, or pictures that people had in their albums and what have you. I suspect there were some challenges in that, converting them into things that could be put in the book. Would you like to share one or two of those challenges with us and explain some of the processes?
Well, I mean, Angus has partly been involved with the big picture, but we find with digital photography today, you can actually take an old picture and turn it almost back into good as new. That is a real joy. There's something about the ability to build back the contrast, to build back the colours in a picture, and that is where digital has really scored for us. And also, I was fiddling around taking pictures of pictures on the wall, and you always get funny distortions. Once again, with digital, you can sort them out. So I'm not saying it was easy, but the technology is there. And when Angus and I fiddled around with that picture at the end, we found one or two spare canvas chairs, director's chairs, on that bit of grass at the back. Angus said, well, we can't leave them there. And I said, he said, we can't leave them there. Let me take them out. So meticulously they were taken out. And you can do that with dust spots on old pictures and things like that. If you've got any old prints at home and they're going grey, they're fading, going sepia, grab your phone and photograph them now, because that digital file will last forever and it can be brought back to almost as good as new.
And you can plant grass over where the chairs were.
So you do, yes, we did. Yes.
Brilliant, thank you. Karen, how often did you get this team together? This is a bit of a challenge, I would have thought. And please be very indiscreet in telling us how the meetings all went. Could you please be as indiscreet as you like about how the meetings went and how often you brought everyone together for this? Were there dramas? Was there laughter?
Sort of periodically as needed. We brought them together.
That didn't sound at all indiscreet.
Well, we tried in practice to meet once a month. Didn't always quite work that way. Only 4 people, strong-minded people, each with specific ideas. My job to pacify. Quite difficult sometimes. But on the whole, it worked well. We had the odd arguments, not agreeing with what was going on one page or what wasn't, but the last very gentle argument occurred on the last day and was covered on page 38 when we were just about to press the go button.
Those of you who have already
And
turn to page 38.
And the first one was on Eddie Calvert
Buy a copy.
jiving.
Oh.
We wrote jiving, but we couldn't agree between us whether it should be jiving, just plain dancing, or some other dance.
No, it's not true. What it wasn't, what it wasn't was jiving, because jiving didn't exist, and I actually thought it was I actually thought it was the twist.
Boring and say plain dancing.
No.
But that was generally not agreed, as you can see.
Right, Carolyn,
This
your
is my
son is
cue.
going now to adjust your speaker to give you a better chance against Martin in this
I'm
debate.
sorry, I'm messing around with
Yeah.
all the bits and pieces inside and outside my ear.
But from memory, it was 1961, and although the twist was around then, I don't think it had made it to Hurlingham. Hurlingham would be my guess. I think it really didn't probably make it to Hurlingham until about 1963. So we concluded it wasn't a twist.
Martin, you've written a bit at the end of the book, which is called The Lantern on the Stern. And knowing as much as you do about the club's history, do you feel that we have cause to be optimistic about the future? And do you feel that the club's uniqueness, which in a sense is its survival, is set to continue?
Optimistic, I don't know is the answer
Wrong
to
answer.
that. I mean, it's a great club, obviously, and it's a hugely popular club. We've got a waiting list of 4,000. The waiting list is indeed closed. I remember once attending a lecture by Richard Dawkins, who you will most of you be familiar with, I imagine. And he argued that all living creatures contained within them a coded description of the environment through which they evolved. And the same is true, I think, for organizations like Hurlingham. We are like we are because of what we've been through. And if you want to see where Hurlingham's going to go in the future, I think you've got to start, we have to sort of second guess the changes that are likely to happen in the environment and see how we are going to react to them. My own worry is that if we stay as we are, with 3,000 or 4,000 very privileged families perpetually owning this jewel in the middle of London, I think we might at some stage have trouble. And I think we need to think about how we might address the changes in society. In my lifetime, society has changed out of all recognition, yet this club basically hasn't. So, I don't know. So, optimistic? I don't know.
Well, I think
things are very difficult to change in Hurlingham.
I think given that we are celebrating with this book the 150th anniversary of the club, Carrie, you're organising an exhibition at the beginning of next year to coincide with Frank Heathcote or Heathcote, I've never quite known. Everyone seems to have their own favourite version. First board meeting, first committee meeting. Would you like to tell us a bit, don't be shy, give it a plug, talk about that exhibition for a moment, please.
Yes, this is my real love, putting on exhibitions. This is where I really get excited. Yes, it was an absolute pure luck that we found that Saturday, the 23rd of February 2019, just happens to be a Saturday, which is brilliant, and was the date in 1869 of the first minute for the club, recorded minute of the club, which we found in that said same safe that I mentioned earlier. So that's what we're planning, to have a big launch for the year with this exhibition. It has been described as the archive exhibition. Even I wouldn't bother to turn up to that. I can assure all of you it is going to be a lot more than an archive exhibition. Yes, we're going to tell the story of the club in decade boards, but popping out of those decade boards and coming out of the experience of looking at this, there were so many things I wanted to explore more. and didn't have the space or the time to put the stuff in. So out will pop in Hurlingham's relations with royalty, a little bit more about polo. Yes, indeed, Martin, there will be pigeon shooting as well. Also, when I was hunting around, I did find all sorts of interesting bits and pieces. So there's going to be a lot of display cases, which will have some of the wonderful records, programs, ephemera that has been collected over the years. And last but not least, and the bit I'm quite excited about, I'm quite interested in interactive. We're going to have a touch screen. We've got a base map. And whenever you press a button, up will pop a picture of what was on that spot 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and so that we would really begin to get an idea of our history and link the past to the present. Also hoping to have events, little bit of a video thing going around of all the pictures we've got. I hope it's going to be very exciting. It certainly should be. But there's a lot of work to do still. So
reading the book's the essential training course.
Absolutely. You've got to have the book. Can I make a little appeal, though, please? Everyone was really good in giving stuff for this. I really need a lot more for the exhibition. I will take very great care of anyone's personal things, but if anyone has pictures, programs, bits and pieces they could lend to us for February, please could you get in touch with me? Thank you very much indeed.
Or that 100th anniversary tankard that has
yes.
still eluded
Has anyone
you.
ever seen one? Did anyone get a 100th centenary tankard? Nope. No, I can't find any.
They're keeping quiet about it.
They're keeping very quiet about it.
So, Tony, you've taken thousands or tens of thousands of photographs around the club, I know, over the course of the years. And I love going through them, the different angles, and the evolution of certain members, especially Christine. There's some wonderful photographs of the delightful evolution of Christine over the years. Is there one photograph you haven't taken that you really wish you had?
Well, I'm always looking for pictures which give other people some satisfaction. As a photographer, I love taking pictures. It's when people say, oh, that one that you've taken is really important to me. And it's always nice when they get used. Back in 2000, Christy and I were walking along the riverbank, stopped at the pontoon there, picture of an elderly couple with arms around each shoulders, a classic picture. I hadn't a clue who the people were. I took the picture. I was phoned by the club the following day saying, were you the man on the jetty with a camera? And I thought, we've got trouble here. Would I phone a number? So I phoned the number. It turned out that I had photographed Anthony Schaffer with a friend. Anthony Schaffer, brilliant author, unfortunately went home that afternoon, went to hospital that evening and died that night. So I was asked by the lady, is the picture any good? I hadn't a clue. I just chucked it into my laboratory in the morning to process, and I hadn't looked at it. I was going to pick it up on the way home. So I rang them and said, is it any good? They said, yes, it's a lovely picture. So I took it round to this lady's flat on the King's Road. There was another man there who was called Peter Schaffer, who wrote Amadeus and Equus and things like that. Lovely picture. Can we use it for the obits? I said, yes, as far as I'm concerned, you're very welcome to. But they said, we need to check one more detail. What I didn't know at the time is that not only did he have a brother, but he also had a wife. And his wife was not the lady living in the flat. Anthony Schaffer's wife was Diane Cilento, who was living in Australia. So I said, well, you can sort it out. Anyhow, needless to say, the picture never got published. It would have been lovely. The picture I would have loved to have had was a picture of a famous author in the Times newspaper. Sadly, because they were terrified what Miss Cilento's lawyers would do, it never got shown. So that's the one I would have loved to have taken and to have had used.
An obit in flagrante.
Indeed, yes.
I'm going to ask you very quickly, please, favourite page? Starting with you, Tony. Favourite page?
Favourite page? Oh, easy. Morris Glover. We took that picture of Morris Glover. I took it. I don't know. It'd be quite near the front of a rock and roll night. I think it was the cricket section trying to do something to actually get people. No, the tennis section. It was a rock and roll evening. It went on the archive board. I was pretty sure it was Morris. Nobody owned up to it. Anyhow, I just as a flyer, I sent a copy of the picture to Morris. Within 12 hours, a picture came back of him wearing exactly the same jacket, 30 years on. So that's satisfaction. That's my favourite. Yes.
So that's pages 118 and 119. They've already been bid for. Carrie, how about you?
Ballooning. I just found that absolutely fascinating that we would have been the centre for ballooning, built a special gas line all the way, and these fabulous pictures. Also sums up the whole picture search for me. I had a few pictures. One of the first members to bring pictures in was the lady with a ballooning album. I bought lots on eBay, and finally we used one of Tony's wonderful images. So the whole thing's for me, comes together on those ballooning pages.
44, 45, 46, and 47. Right, we're bidding for the next page, Carolyn.
I'm on 3 pages, I'm afraid. Putting a bit about the club around, the party celebrations for the Queen's 90th birthday. That was fantastic, on page 35. No, anyway. And another enjoyable moment on another birthday was my middle son, Patrick, blowing out his 5 birthday candles on page 107. And then 95 years of coverage when we're only showing 150. It's quite difficult. I quite like Tony's pictures of us on the back flap.
It's fabulous, isn't it? Absolutely.
Very important, because we're hardly seen at all. So.
And in Tony's usual style, 2 men with women who are not their wives.
You've got to have a bit of fun.
No lawyer in Australia.
But no lawyer in Australia, thank you. Martin.
Well, an interesting picture for me is this picture on page 59, which shows a group of soldiers watching a group of ladies play cricket. And they're convalescing soldiers from the First World War, and I sort of feel the caption ought to say, "Can't wait to get back to the front."
So the photograph of crutches and cricket.
Yeah, it's crutches and cricket.
It's a wonderful shot.
Yeah.
And it was used in part of the publicity for something to do with the book. And unfortunately, the words describing the event were placed over the ladies, so all you could see were the soldiers, which sort of slightly defeated the object. Can we open the floor to questions, please? Anyone like to ask a question? Lizzie.
I've got a suggestion and a question. And the suggestion first is anyone who hasn't seen the embroidery of the history of the club, put the light on and study it.
Hear, hear.
Because it is stunning. And as a embroiderer, I wasn't on the I wasn't one of the ladies that started it, but it really is a wonderful record of all the history of the club. Having said that, my question to Carrie is, we joined in 1974 and we were almost begged to join. It was faded gentility and the numbers were quite low and the club was in a bit of a state. So I just wondered what your take is on that.
Carrie.
I think this is what I was trying to say before. You have all these peaks and troughs with the club. I think we got out of trouble because by 1980, everyone realized the club was in trouble. Huge scheme of improvement was put into place, and that meant that you got a whole lot of new people. I can remember actually dancing here at tea dances with my granny, much to my embarrassment, with tents all over the quad, and you had to go around the puddles. I think, the terrace room was done, they built the polo bar, you've got the harness room, and then the fitness centre, and whoosh, we have a club with lots of things to do.
Page 131, for anyone who wants to see an image of the embroidery. It is quite stunning, and it's just on the way through to the bar, which I'm sure you'll all want to go to later. Another question down here at the front, please.
I'm a teacher, so I've got a very clear voice. Okay. I have been a member a long time, well, a relatively long time. I walked into the club, I said, my parents were members, my grandparents were members, my uncle played polo for the club. They said, welcome to the club. No lining up for me. Anyway, the reason I wanted to say something was Nigel Miskin's papers were turned into a wonderful play. I was in it, so I know. And I have DVDs, not DVDs, videos of it. So if you wish to borrow, I also have videos of my children in plays. So if you want to borrow those as a thing for the other children to see, very welcome.
Thank you.
Very nice thought.
I've got the script as well of that. Yes.
I have too.
Yep.
I was Jemima Duck.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Hi, I have two comments, one of which I've already told Carrie, and that is I wrote a biography of an artist called G.F. Watts, and in his widow's diaries, wife's diaries, were reference in the 19th century to their visit here with a brother who was a polo player. But the other thing also for Carrie is that I founded a charity, Arts for Dementia, and our first participant was Caroline Brooke Johnson's mother. Is she the one who... She's a picture.
She is indeed.
She is the one.
Phyllis. Yes, Phyllis Brooke Johnson. She was the lady that, well, she says she bullied the committee into building the pool and they didn't want it.
She's a marvellous.
Her other lovely story, if I'm allowed one more story about Mrs. Brooke Johnson, she's quite become my heroine. At the opening of the pool, she got these bathing ladies coming, and they put all the lights on because it was in the evening time. And then suddenly, much to her horror, she found that all the ladies were wearing white bathing costumes in 1932. She hurriedly rushed round, got them all off the diving board and got them all changed into black bathing costumes before they did their display. I think she must have been quite a character, this lady.
Too much information.
Oh, I think there was.
A question down here. Brilliant.
The book is absolutely fascinating, and I've been following Carrie's archival vignettes over the last 2 or 3 years in the Hurlingham magazine. And my question really is twofold. One is, there was a timeline that was published in the summer of 2016, which I have here, which gives these events to do with the building and the structure. But my real question is about the landscape and the architects. Aside from the original house, there isn't any architect mentioned, as I remember, least of all Lutyens, and 1906, when he did the Horseshoe Courtyard. Perhaps I've missed that with all the photographs, but it just seemed to me, having followed with great interest your articles in the magazine on Capability Brown, and particularly his star pupil, Humphrey Repton, whose anniversary is also next year, there seems such a paucity of this side, the physical side and the architectural side of the club.
You missed one of my little articles then, because I did a whole article on Lutyens and his work at the club. 9 months from day to day or something like that. It was 9 months from beginning to end. And
I have signed, sealed and delivered.
no, it was definitely on Lutyens. I can't remember the title of it.
This is on Lutyens.
And yes, that's the one. He is mentioned in here. It's very hard. Joseph Moyes did the original Orangery. We now know about him. And he built a few other things. Yes, there are various bits and pieces. It's quite hard to find. The grounds are even worse.
Page 36 and page 38
Yes.
are where the references to Lutyens are. And it's quite interesting, you referred earlier to the idea that throughout the club's history, there have been massive bits of expenditure that have coincided with moments of difficulty. And of course, that was one when Lord Valencia pushed through a reluctant club the expenditure of £10,000 on the Lutyens' work in order to overcome the difficulties of the ending of pigeon shooting.
Yeah,
so we can offend everyone with that one.
we can, definitely.
But page 36 and 38.
No, we mentioned
we did cover
Lutchens.
Lutchen.
Could I just say, concerning the landscape and the grounds, that the Gardens and Landscape contribution to the celebrations next year will be a special guided walk, guided and self-guided, and we're preparing a booklet which will cover more of the history of the grounds. So, we should be mentoring Capability Brown and Repton and Lutchens, as well as, fine trees and sporting activities in that. So that will complement the book. But a modest booklet.
And did Gertrude Jekyll have anything to do with the sunken garden, or do we not know?
We don't know, but of course they were great. We know that Lutchens was involved with the club at the time that Broome House was demolished, and of course Jekyll was his great friend. So.
Nicely put. Any other questions? Perfect.
Can I just ask, I think one of the biggest events in the last 150 years is the loss of what must have been 50% or maybe even 75% of the land when the polo grounds were sold. And what I'm interested in how the club reacted to that. Was that sort of welcome with open arms because it was contributing to the public good, or was there a battle over it?
There was a mighty battle. But at the end of the day, we got an awful lot of money out of it. It's about £290,000 we were paid for those two grounds. But and no doubt it completely changed the complexion of the club with all the polo players gone. So, major event. But we nearly lost the club as well. They wanted to take the whole club.
But it went right up into Parliament and diplomatic circles in Parliament. It was the mother of all rows.
This calculation of those who wanted to buy it was that they forgot that most of the ambassadors were honorary members here.
And created for that very reason. That was when the Parliament and the councils were again the club. The club decided to invite all these ambassadors to become honorary members. Ernest Bevan and his wife were made members. She used to love coming to the Sunday afternoon tea dance. And you don't close a club down when your Prime Minister's wife likes to go there for a dance, do you?
Tom.
Yeah. Just another quickie on the Lantern of the Stern. We have no honorary members today apart from the local priest, I think, and the local Catholic priest. Nobody else. And I actually think there is a case for ex officio members.
Maybe one small family named after a university town.
Who's that?
The Cambridges.
Oh, yes, well.
Cambridge.
Sisters.
First of all, that's not true. We do have temporary sports members.
I'm talking about honorary members.
Well, okay. But anyway, I just want to make a comment, and then I have a question for Martin. I think there's a mathematical term called an inflection point. And I think you've just been, as it turns out, you've just been talking about inflection points after the war. I think the modern inflection point was Leslie Pinkett's, the first development, and that's from then on, the development of the club has not stopped, and I think that was a magic moment. All that fuss about additional subscriptions and whatever it was, I think from then on, the club has gone on. I just wanted to ask Martin on his slightly gloomy prospects. I mean, maybe we should ask Mrs. Corbyn to be a member. But I mean, are you looking forward, or in the sort of more literal sense, are you looking forward to an extreme left-wing government and 15,000 people living in an exclusive club? Is that your? I just want a bit more information on what your gloom is about.
Well, I think I've said I'm not particularly being gloomy. I just think it is something that's changing around us, and I think we need to think about how we react to it. And interesting. Can I just go back to your other point about the development that was done in the 1990 thereabouts? It transformed the club. But when I was going through the archives, reading through all the minutes, I came across this 10-page diatribe from one particular member who some of you will know. I'm not going to say. But I have said he's a he. But he wrote this 10-page diatribe to Leslie Pincott about why this development was a complete disaster. So, plus ça change.
I started.
The book is actually on sale, as you might have noticed over there, at the crafty price of £25. But if you've got your club charge card, thank you for the introduction of charge cards. If you have your club charge card, I think there's a 4.5% discount, which has got to be almost £1 or something like that. Possibly less, I don't know. But thank you very, very much, all four of you, both for being here this evening and subjecting yourself to this torture of Inquisition, but more importantly for the enormous amount of work that's gone into producing what I think is an absolutely fabulous piece. The authors will happily sign books. The books are shrink-wrapped. If you wish to have them sign a card, they will do that, and you can stick it in with the book if you're giving it as a present. Thank you very much. The bar and the bookshop are now open.